Let us finish our issue and crisis management today, which is I think chapter 6 or 5 of our textbook. Lots of studies in business and management is about like concerning your company's product, service, how to sell more, how to promote your product more to the customers. So exactly lots of practice in business studies dealing with your customers, your product directly. But topics like crisis management or issues management is not really, again, talking about or dealing with your product or your customers directly. So it is actually management of lots of social issues. So you may be wondering why a company may need to handle that social issue. So that is maybe the question you may ask. I think again, like even like a few years ago, managing lots of social issue, especially like this kind of a crisis issue, were not that important to the companies. However, things changed. Of course, your product, your customers, your stakeholders important on one hand, but on the other, dealing with your lots of social issue maybe or may not be related, even if they are not really part of your business, you have to still concern about it, and you have to identify what would be the likely like social and political issue to your company. So based on your clear understanding, you have to act correctly. We will explain why by looking at issues management and crisis management, which is also a very emerging topic this day in management studies. So I received lots of flyers from lots of business and management institutions globally about like asking new study, new paper on the topic of crisis management and issues management, because the practitioners as well as scholars want a new case, new theory, new practice on this issue. So I think the importance of this crisis management and issues management will be bigger and larger to the study in this field. So briefly, I think the looking at this chapter, probably we can have some fundamental understanding about the issues management and crisis management. So again, like lots of functional department in the companies, right? Marketing department, operational department, finance department. Even if you don't know, even if you don't really study what's the role of this department, a functional department, probably you may roughly guess what they are doing, right? Probably this department is dealing with something, what they make, what they produce. Having said that, public affairs department, which is now emerged as a very core key department in business company, and like try to understand what's the role of this public affairs department, 홍보 team, right? Very important this day. As we discussed, public affairs departments was like a separate departments, right? So they do their job separately, because their job is pretty much non-commercial, right? But as we discussed in our previous session, this day the public affairs departments closely work with, say, planning department of the companies when company design their short-term and long-term plan for the company's operation. So political issues, social issues nowadays intertwine, combined together with your company's a real business issues, right? So that is actually the point. So just let us talk about, like, again, what's issues, what is crisis, what is issues management, what is crisis management, and what is the process of, say, issues management and crisis management. It's better for you guys to look at the real cases before you are looking at lots of theoretical explanation of this approach. So I will briefly explain some of the examples by some other companies, especially like global companies in other countries, they are very good at preparing this kind of crisis management, issue management, and so on. So when a shocking event occurs, they know how to do it, how to manage that crisis. Like just think that think about Korea as a company, for instance, and like two years ago, Seoul sank, right? The ship Seoul is the name of the boat, and it sank and killed more than 200 students and passengers there. Just forget about whose fault was there and who made a mistake. Just focus on that event, right? That crisis happened, and the question is how then the government should react upon that tragic event, or how the government should manage that tragedy. So that is simply say crisis management, right? The same thing happened in USA. A couple of years ago, a huge hurricane actually attacked USA, right? I just forgot the name of the hurricane, Katrina, right? Yeah, that hurricane attacked USA, I think. So it remained with hundreds of injured people, a lot of people killed, turned to be a lot of people somewhere in mid-USA became homeless. And exactly the same thing happened in USA, just like what Korean government had in Seoul. Right? The government USA at that time received huge criticism, attack by the government's poor management of that crisis. Just like Korean government received a huge criticism, attack by public because of the government's poor management of Seoul. Right? So same thing actually happening, which means that the government kind of organization mismanaged the crisis. Just forget about whose fault is it, right? We don't know yet, right? Still investigating it. So the question is how the organization can manage that one. So a very a classic example of the poor crisis management, Katrina hurricane, am I right? Katrina? Yeah. And Seoul, a poor example of crisis management. But what about like Boston Marathon bomb? I think again 2 years ago, a terrorist dropped a bomb in Boston Marathon, right, killing a couple of people and a lot of injured person. So same crisis happened in Boston, but in that case, nobody got the blame because the Boston Police Department managed well that crisis, right? I mean, Boston Police Department certainly may have lots of attack by the public because the terrorist attack is actually the outcome, a result of like poor, say, security of policemen. So probably the police department of Boston, no way out of the criticism, but no one actually criticized seriously about the job of the Boston Police Department because the department of the Boston Police Department managed the crisis well. So probably I will tell why the Boston the police department managed that crisis while the USA government and Korean government mismanaged that huge crisis. What's the difference? We'll briefly talk about that one later. But before that, just try to differentiate first what is, say, issues and what is crisis. You have to differentiate those terminology. Like issues is kind of an event, as we see, event or a trend, a change of trend, right? So, I mean, like a lot of sociological or political environments, a lot of things keep changing in sociological and political environments. So because of that environmental change, we see a lot of a change in, say, trend, in value, or change in, say, people's interest. So once that change in trend made, and once after that, once the mass media start to pay attention, then it becomes an issue, right? So any change or change in trend can become an issue, but we call an issue only when people, public, especially the media, start to have their interest on that particular change of interest. So the trend and change crystallize into an issue by the attention of mass media. So it creates a kind of a situation that evoke a bigger attention and more concern from public. So that is what I call like issues, right? But the point of the so this one is this. Issue is more like something that is evolving, likely to evolve in the future. We exactly don't know what would be the direction of that evolvement, but we just start to feel that that event or change in trend may evolving into something else, which may impact your company's operations. So that is kind of what we call issues. So people, especially people from the company, if issues are that much important or important as much as impacting the company to the company's performance, then is it really possible to categorize what would be the issue that is particularly important to the companies? Right? There might be a lot of issues actually out there, but of course not all issues will be important to the companies. So your company can classify what particular issue may be impacting your business. So your job, especially public affairs department's job, is just try to point out of many issues, which issue would be really your company should be very carefully paying attention and prepare something. While the crisis, on the other hand, is something that happened all of a sudden. Right? So that is crisis and event pretty much like two sides of the same coin, but the only difference is that crisis is something that happened already, while the issue would be like something not really happened but likely to happen in the future in certain way. But a crisis again is something that happened all of a sudden. So you just cannot imagine that kind of crisis actually occurred. So when you say issues management means that you just identify, kind of a process of identifying and preparing and responding to that possible issue. So that's what I call it, like issues management. Let's talk about then what kind of approaches there when we say issues management. Again, like conventional approach was that in the past, the issue is, as I told you, like it's non-commercial sector, so it is kind of an issue that is separate from your company's business. So company thought that issue management or issues identification is kind of additional job to your companies. So that's what conventional approach, right? So issues identification, right? Preparing some issues, some extra job that your company should do. That is the kind of concept of issue management in the past. But nowadays, issue management, as I told you, is combined with your real management practice, especially strategic management. So even if you are preparing something that is not really happened yet, that should be reflected in your real planning business. So that's what I call a strategic management approach. So how company view issues, there are actually two different types here, conventional approaches and strategic management approaches. We can say that a lot of companies this day take issue management like strategic management issues. It is really core part of your business function. So that is why the public affairs department's role is getting not getting more critical to the companies, the major job. So, like a picture, I mean, I hope you can clearly see the map here, like how the strategic issue management is actually progressed and prepared and so on. Very simple. You just read lots of trend. So how trend is changing in your environment, in your even company, people, employees, and also like how the trend is changing in measuring performance. So the point here is that you just keep monitoring what is the trend, what's the change in trend in everywhere. And you have to look at whether that change in trend really similar or different from your company's objective that you designed at the beginning, right? So if you notice some change in society and you just compare that change with your organization's objective, you can clearly see whether that change in your objectives are pretty much, say, aligned or not really mismatching and so on. So by comparing your goal and the change outside, you can see what's your company's, say, weakness in that sense, and what's your company's, say, the power, strengths, and so on. So simply by comparing your objective and the change outside, now you can see what kind of issues would be your urgent one to deal with. So you may end up with kind of how to react, how to respond, and so on. So I mean, this is just kind of a conceptual process of issue management. But I think rather than this one, I have a more clear map quoted from other book, so probably I may use that one later. So this is like how issue and crisis differ in each other. So have a look at it closely. But the major difference, as you see, between issue and crisis is that the company, in theory, believe that you can identify what will be your issues in the future. So the public affairs departments believe that if they are very good at monitoring and reading some trend change, they can prepare something by looking at what issue will be coming to the companies. Of course, the companies, public affairs departments are not perfect, but they still believe they can be identified before the issue become really crystallized. While crisis, you just cannot really identify what it is unless it is really happening to you. So that's the major difference. So in crisis management, it is actually made and done only when the crisis actually happens. So that's, I think, the major difference. So the point is, crisis may be part of your issues if you are really good at issue making, but a lot of cases, crisis happen out of something beyond the issue that you identified. So you have to prepare that crisis happening from somewhere you never imagined. Again, definition of issues, kind of we can say a debate. I mean, I just keep saying what's the meaning of issues because lots of textbook, lots of newspaper define the issue in many different ways. So I think for those of you who first looking at this topic, probably you may be confused in understanding what issue really is. So basically, issues is kind of we can say a debate. We debate something, but we don't know what exactly we are debating on, right? So because the debate is not clearly defined. So we debate something, but we just don't know what we are actually debating. So lots of lack of definition in debates, that can be the issues. Another important thing is that the issue actually deals with like a lot of conflicting values and interests. Your values and interests may not be the same with the other people's value and interest. That is what, if there is a gap in values and interest, we can say that is also an issue. And the point here is that the issue never resolves automatically. Somebody should be there to manage and resolve that the problem. So it is pretty much value-laden term. So these are some of, I think that you can really clearly see the example of issues that companies tend to have in their practice. So these are pretty much issues, right? Like food companies, for instance. The typical issues to the food company might be like safety things, like food safety may be one of the very critical issues. Like chemical companies, for instance, then like safety issue may be the major issues of the firm, right? And also a lot of retail companies, for instance, then the consumerism may be also an issue to the firms. And like also, again, like a resource company, for instance, in that case, like environment, may be the key issues to the firm. So which means that this firm should prepare something on that issues. I don't know how the firms actually prepare on that issues, but a lot of stakeholders made some question about that issues. So you have to have some, again, your firm's strategic, say, position, posture, and plan upon a particular issues emerge to your firms. Especially also manufacturing firms case, lots of labor practice, human rights may be a very common issue to the companies. So we just cannot see what would be the exact issue, the most important critical issue to your firms. We talk about later, you have to, that's why, list what are the most critical issues to you, right? So you have to choose the, say, priority among many issues. Again, these are the basic assumptions about the issue management. Like public affairs departments firmly believe that if we work hard on issue identification, then you can definitely identify what it is, and you can definitely prepare what to do and how to react and so on. So the point is that if you are really keen at identifying issues, then you can prepare something on that issue in the right way, so you can minimize your firm's risk or financial damage or loss in that reputation. So that's why public affairs departments do their best to identify the critical issue to their firm and so on. So that's why I have used three companies example in our previous sessions. Again, Daimler Chrysler case, car company, 동의? Yeah. So, so some of the institution just check lots of issue management practice by many global companies, and they choose the best issue management case and they give the award. And the case that I introduced now is some of the example as a best issue management case. Like Daimler Chrysler case, they thought, as I told you in our previous session, child passenger safety was chosen for the firm as the major issue, so the company prepares something a lot. When that issue actually emerge and impact the firms in certain way. Just imagine, right? What happened if, say, social activists say something about child passenger safety issue to your companies? Then how can you react that one? So this is how Daimler Chrysler did. They act first, right? They preempt the actions before this issue really crystallized to your company's operation by introducing a campaign, what they call a Fit for a Kid, right? Kind of a campaign that provide a free child seat inspection program. So whatever car you drive, if you go to the, say, Daimler Chrysler Center, you can check your seat safety inspection. They provide that inspection for free. So why company did that one? So why the issue important to the organization? So as you see here, the Daimler is very committed to the safety. So they can also help to save people's life. So actually, another important question is who involved in that campaign in the company? So Fit for Kid campaign involving all the people from chairman to even dealer, staff in the dealer. So all of the company-wide, including all of their supply chain, actually participating in that campaign. So by having that campaign, what the company expect was actually who get the benefit. So which stakeholders group get affected. So parents mostly, grandparents, caregivers, and so on. So this group of stakeholders may get some benefits, which may be the part of the potential the customers in the future by giving this safety inspection programs. So the important question, what is the key objective of this issue management program? So the Daimler Chrysler say it expands the awareness of the personal responsibility, take the safety seriously, and so on. So the result of the campaign provide more than 2,000 certified inspectors actually dispatched everywhere and fix that problem and so on. So very good example of issues management. And McDonald's as well. I think very good approach, example of the issues management here again. So upon the issues management practice by McDonald's, for instance, your question should be, is it really important to the organization, and who actually involved in the campaign and issue management, and who get affected, who get the benefits, and what was the objective of that issue management and so on. So the company should get a very clear answer to these kind of questions. Otherwise, the issues management is not really effective to your organization. So basically, those are the examples of issues management, especially by the global firms. But the next question is then how your company can actually prepare a very good issues management. Right? You just cannot copy or the case of the McDonald's or say a DuPont, Daimler Chrysler. So you have to create your own good issues management. So this is pretty much like theoretical process of issue management, right? Identify issues. You never know which issue would be really critical to you, but you have to identify by giving the priority. And analyze the issue, prioritization of issues, and you have to set up some action plan for that issues. Then you have to really do it, and finally you have to evaluate. So evaluate means who get the benefit by your issues management, and does that contribute to your firm's, say, performance. Like DuPont case, they manifest that why we do the issue management is because at the end we want to increase our revenue. So the point of issue management at the end is actually the company try to be a better company by building better reputation, more market share, and so on, right? So these are pretty much the process of issue management, and these are pretty much what you do as a member of public affairs department. So the point again is how can you then identify the issues? Again, a lot of issues out there, right? So which one is the most critical to you? So that is the questions. How can you choose the most important one? Very tricky questions. So basically, you scan a lot of environments. So you identify emerging issues and trends. So pretty much obviously, this is what you do. So let me tell you, I understand. I used to work in public affairs department in government a few years ago. So these are kind of job that I did. I read more than say 30 newspapers every day. I just keep reading, and I just find what articles describing my organization in what way. So I just take all the articles from the newspaper, magazine, and so on. So I collected hundreds of articles from every, say, media, even newspaper and so on. So based on that collected item, we have, say, meetings. So people from every department come together and discuss whether that article is right or whether that article is what's wrong and what's right, who write, why that article written, and so on. So a lot of actually discussion going on based on your environmental scan. And this day even, your job is edit because we have lots of blog, SNS. I'm not really SNS guy. I don't know how to do the SNS, right? So I mean that's my weakest point. All I know, the technology that I know is just email. But this day, the public affairs department also checking a lot of social network, right? I will explain later the success of crisis management by Boston Police Department was the department's smart use of SNS. Just imagine, like governments never use SNS, right? They don't trust SNS, but certainly the Korean government never rely on something to deliver, never use SNS. They never rely on SNS to deliver the message of the government. Of course, other countries as well. The USA government, for instance, I never heard that USA government, like Obama, of course, he may chatting something through SNS with people of USA, but not really like key information delivered through SNS. That's, I think, the nature of government, but the exceptional case was the Boston Police Department. Wise use of the SNS actually helped the organization to manage the crisis successfully. So the point again, not only like official mass media, you have to look at, say, a blog, a social network, like printed media, online media, like YouTube, social media, and so on. So you have to monitor a lot of items. I think the collecting events, collecting change in trend, it's not that difficult. If you spend a lot of hours, days, I mean, you can do that. But the point is this part. This is tricky part. Who are the leading forces for that social change? There might be some divergence in ideas. Like somebody say, these are the leading figure, or that are the leading events for certain kind of a trend change. But the point is that you have to identify who are the leading forces on that particular event or that particular change. What are the leading forces? Is it a book, or some company, or some people, or what? So you have to identify the core of that change. And also important thing is that, so I think these are again, the process of issues management, but I think that the difficult part is certainly this one, identification, analysis, and prioritization of the issue, because you should have an agreement among your people in the organizations. Pretty much a lot of people have different ideas. So getting into the agreement on this part would be not that easy. But the point is that this day, responding something should be fast. Right? Say you respond, your company responds some event or issue, say in like a week later or a month later. That's not really working. You have to react quickly in few days. That's the, I think, key this day. You have to act quickly. But if you consuming your time on this issue, then probably you have to think about the effectiveness of your public affairs department. So that's why the issue selling, issue buyings are also the the important concept in issues management. So the issue selling, kind of a terminology that the public affairs guys use a lot in their practice. So issue selling, so you have to define, I mean, you just find, say, these are now key issues to your firms. But that's not enough. You have to identify what is the key message here. That's actually also a point of agreement, right? Your members may have a whole lot different ideas on that key message identification. So the point here, issue selling means you have to identify what is the key message, right? Some activist group now say something, and you just find that now that activist creating some crystallizing some issues against your companies. Then you have to see what's the message of that activist. What's the rationale of what they say. So that's what I call issue setting. What is the key message? And issues buying. So let's say you are successfully defined key message from, say, the issue maker, what they call, and you have to actually prepare some responding strategy, right? And how, to whom you are going to deliver that message. So that is also another matter here. Who actually buy your issue management strategy? So in sum, when you say identification first, then your job is you have to analyze issues. Exactly the meaning of issues analysis is this one. You have to have clear answer of lots of who questions, right? Who is affected by that issue? Who got the most interest in that issue? Who is in the right central position in that issue making? Who is actually expressing their opinions? So you have to express a lot of, you have to say, have an answer of a lot of who's here. If you have a clear answer upon these who questions, then you can say this is what you call a analysis of an issues. Right? So issue analysis is actually the process of you answering all these who types of questions. And also another, if you go through the issue analysis, then your job is certainly which issues are the most important and critical, right? Environmental issues, activist issues, consumer issues, and so on, lots of issues. Having only limited resource, you have to choose the priority, right? So how can you determine what is the most critical issues? And these are just simply some of the examples, and many actually frameworks suggested out there. But these are the key. When you choose what is the most important issues to your firms, you have to compare the issues to these 5 major, what I call a filtering criteria. So is that issue affect your long-term, short-term strategy? Is that issues really relevant issues or just out of the bound issues and ridiculous and not making sense issues? Or is that issue really materialized in some way so that you can act upon that issues? Is it really important to your companies? Is it really urgent? So something really happening soon? So you have to act now. So by using the assumption, using these 5 criteria, you can certainly what is, say, the most important issues to your firm and so on. But pretty much using these 5 criteria is pretty much you have to use your value judgment. So that's why the people, public affairs departments use a lot of statistics or quantitative method to choose the priority. Panel, inviting a lot of experts and asking them. And contents analysis, Delphi technique. I mean, these are kind of a statistical analysis based on lots of collected data. So you can choose the number, right? What is the most important issues and so on. But hopefully you can learn this one in statistic course and quantitative courses in the future. So the point again is you have to filtering the most critical issues. The concept of choosing the most critical one is like this. A lot of issues here, but you have to choose number. So you only prepare your actions upon some of the top priorities here from. Otherwise, you may simply abuse your resource. Okay, let us continue about what is then the, say, crisis management. So how the crisis managements are similar, what's different from the issues management, right? while the crisis is something that occurring all of a sudden. So so you just cannot always tell what it will be, what will be happening to you. So you just cannot anticipate or forecast beforehand. And also, your crisis may or may not be within your issue category. So if the crisis is happening out of your issue category, then you will be much more in chaos. So that's why the crisis management is a little bit difficult than the issue management. So why crises happen actually? Like, these are typical cause of the business crisis, like acts of God, right? Simply the God hate you. Heavy snow, flood, earthquake, so you just cannot resist it. Heavy rain. So this kind of operation just happen all of a sudden, so you just cannot run away from that accident, right? Or it can be a mechanical problems, right? I think like a few years ago, Toyota had a lot of recall of the cars because of the cars like sudden unintended unintended acceleration, like conversion, right? Moving forward without your intention. So that is a mechanical problem. So that the Toyota didn't expect that crisis, but it happened. So it is definitely a mechanical problem. But it is also a poor management of the Toyota upon that crisis. If you were the owner, the CEO of Toyota, then if you had that, say, mechanical crisis, then what will be your action? You never expect that crisis, but that happened. So if you are the CEO, then how can you manage that crisis, if I ask you? I will explain later. There is a kind of a gold standard in crisis management, and the CEO of Toyota actually did all against that gold standard of crisis management. But the point again, the crisis happened because of the technology problem, or it can be the human errors. Seriously, so there is human error. There is crisis. The construction company who done that bridge, actually not really carefully inspecting the bridge regularly. Of course, to have a truck actually passing that bridge too often, so there may be another cause. But also, more careful inspection may be preventing that crisis. So point again, it can be caused by human errors or wrong decision making of the management. So this is the nature of the crisis. Very low possible to occur, but once it happens, its impacts are huge. Because if you mismanage the crisis, actually, certainly your company certainly very likely to close your business sometimes. Like when September 11, when the USA had the terrorist attack, a lot of companies actually reside their office in that Twin Towers. Right? And actually, that crisis is not really the mistake of the companies in the building, right? It was the attack of the terrorists. But what happened was that after the attack, a lot of companies simply changed their management. Right? Nobody expects that kind of unusual, abnormal crisis, but whether they like it or not, all of the management simply changes because they said to be like not really properly manage that crisis beforehand. So it really changed the whole organization if you mismanage the crisis. Again, we don't know how to correctly prepare the crisis. What is the right? We don't really exactly aware. You're not really exactly aware of the best crisis management, but at least we know these are the things that you should not in managing the crisis. Minimizing the issue, you should not minimizing the issues. Unlike the try to minimize the crisis. This is a bad idea always. You have to tell the truth all the time. And stonewalling is like denying something. So you should not deny the crisis. You just admit it. Once you admit it, you have to admit it fast. Admit it fast, quick. So that's a stonewalling. So too little, too late. That means like if you try to manage the crisis, do it hard, and try it hard, and try it as early as possible. So that's pretty much the thing you do. So should not be too slow in managing, defending the crisis. Should not deny. You should not minimize the crisis. So these are the things that you should not handle. So what kind of crisis actually we have? Economic crisis, physical crisis, so a lot of different kinds of crisis. So yeah, the crisis would be coming from always somewhere else, but probably if you really, really want to classify them, it may be some of this one, like economic crisis, recession, or your company simply could be taken over by some other companies, hostile takeover, or like stock market crash. That can be the economic crisis. Physical crisis, like accidents in your operation line, production failure, supply breakdown, and personnel. Also, personnel crisis. Like a few years ago, the employee of Domino Pizza actually made a video record and uploaded into YouTube. That video record was what is actually happening in the kitchen of Domino's Pizza. The video contains like the chef actually using cheese sticks to picking his nose, and also the video shows a very dirty environment of the kitchen and so on. So try to show that Domino Pizza doing a poor, say, quality control of the pizza making. So their personnel, the employee, may cause the crisis, right? So, and also criminals, privacy, your reputation as well, rumors, certainly. Some customers who don't like you very much may spread like negative, unidentified rumor to you about your firms. That is also this day a crisis. The power of social networks are stronger. So you have to respond something on that reputational crisis and natural crisis as well. Again, the outcome of crisis, the worst outcome of the crisis is that your firm, your bottom line is actually shaken, which means that your business is closed. Right? Just when Seoul sank, what happened? 해양경찰청, right? The Korea Coast Guard, Coast Guard simply disappeared. One organization simply gone. So crisis actually close, make you extinct. You just disappear. And also major power shift of your organization. So that's why crisis management is simply very important. So this is basically how crisis management process. You have to identify, pretty much a generic process of crisis management. So doing it real in practice would be pretty much very hard. But actually you have to know this is probably the very routine process of crisis management. You have to see the symptom first, and so I mean this is actually how the crisis is actually evolving, right? And based on lots of poor crisis management, the researcher found that these are pretty much very common pattern of poor crisis management. The most often referring reason of poor management was that the executive, the CEO, was simply too excited about what happened, so they just couldn't concentrate on that problem solving, or simply the CEO do not have the ability to deal with the crisis. So that's why this day, a lot of global companies, when crisis happen, they have another, say, what they call a committees. So the CEO do not need to be part of that committee. So under that crisis moment, that specially designed special team of crisis management actually hand over the crisis management of the firms. So temporarily they manage the whole organization until the crisis actually move over. So we just cannot too much rely on the CEOs upon the crisis moment. And most of the most of what we see as a poor crisis management is that just the organization just shut their mouths, won't say anything, right? So that's why quieting on particular crisis actually spreading a lot of unidentified rumors, which worsening the situation more and more. So that's why a lot of studies actually try to tell us how then companies can prepare right crisis strategies. So Fink study is one of the examples. And I think our textbook introduced the Business Week's 5 steps in managing crisis. So I think a lot of companies actually, certainly if you see the guideline of crisis management, that is pretty much based on the Business Week's suggestions. I mean, again, we are not really perfect, so we just cannot really prepare what crisis will be happening. But at least you can prepare that crisis if you are able to identify what is the most vulnerable area to you. Like DuPont, for instance, chemical companies. So the likelihood of the crisis would be somewhere in operation part, chemical spillover or supply breakdown and so on. Possibly highly likely the crisis happening in that area. So you can at least what are the vulnerable area to your business, and develop specific contingency plan on that vulnerable area. So say this is a DuPont, the chemical companies example of crisis management. They're a kind of a manual on when the crisis happen, especially in their operation line. I'm sorry, in Korean here, but their point is that once an accident happen, their target is they just solve it in 24 hours by determining what the level of the crisis is from level 1 to 3. So depending on the level of the crisis, they prepare specific drills, manuals, and they dispatch their own teams rather than relying on, say, policemen or firefighters and so on. So they just try to solve the problem by themselves because they know the operation and so on. So the point of DuPont's crisis management in operation thing here is that they just keep exercising this one as their kind of routines of operation. So just keep exercising regularly. So when these things really happen, they can act quickly, minimizing the damage by the crisis. Another important thing is form a crisis teams. Again, a lot of people think that the CEO should solve or should do something on the crisis, but things are not that way. So this day, crises are recommended to managed by special team, what we call crisis team. A lot of exercise. The point is this one, learn from experience. If they have some experience in the past by the crisis, they find some lesson, not to repeat that crisis again and again. And lastly, the important thing in crisis management is communications. Again, back to the Boston policeman case, unlike Sewol-ho and the Katrina hurricane, the Boston bomb crisis was successfully managed by the police department very well in Boston. Because of this SNS, as I mentioned, like the government officials hardly use the SNS to manage the crisis, but the Boston Police Department break the rules. At the beginning, right after the terrorist attack, the police department made official SNS account and start communicating with people. First, to prevent an unidentified rumor, but also second, they just try to settle down people, calm down people by making official, say, SNS to people there. And people say that Boston policemen departments are pretty much open-minded organization in that sense. So like try to solve the crisis by using SNS at the beginning of the crisis. That is quite very unusual approach from the government perspective. USA government never did. Korean government never did. And a lot of other government never did as well. So I think because actually SNS nowadays is getting just more like a snowballing the crisis in pretty much negative ways. So the department officially get there first and try to dominate the SNS environment first, attract a lot more help as well as settle down people from wrong information and so on. So that's why, even though it is actually mistakes, right? The lack of a careful, say, inspection of police department that cannot really prevent that Boston bomb, marathon bomb terrorist attack. But actually, the police department didn't actually receive, like, say, criticism and so on. So communication is important once crisis happen. So these are the rule of communication in crisis. Again, should be done by team. You should choose a very right key spokesperson. You have to train them well. Communication protocol and so on. So I think this is very important, right? We have no time to remind all these things in detail, but if you're a communication team well prepared upon these rules, then probably very convenient to react something on the crisis. Okay, let's finish here. So next Tuesday, I will give you the midterm exam review. So make sure that all of students be here. Right? I know that the chapters are quite new. Each topics are quite new to you, so I will tell you how to prepare the midterm exam and so on. So be here on next Tuesday.